I had just arrived in the city to join my aunt when I heard embarrassing gasps coming from the next room before I even had a chance to sit down. This middle-aged man in an administrative jacket asked me, "Who are you?" But my aunt said to him with a smile, "Don't be afraid, he's my nephew, a child who doesn't understand anything." At that moment, I realized that in this bright and bustling city, some family relationships are far more complicated and sordid than I had imagined. My name is Chunin. I dropped out of high school this year. My mother didn't want me to sit around idle at home, so she sent me to join the one she calls her best sister, 22. To seem close, my mother told me to call her aunt, but in reality, there is no blood relation between us. I hadn't been at my aunt's for 10 minutes when there was a knock at the door. Outside stood a man in his 40s, wearing a black administrative jacket, his gaze as sharp as an eagle's. He looked me up and down and asked coldly, "Who is he?" I stood frozen in place, at a loss, when Zhang Zinan came out of the room, naturally took the man's arm, wearing a flattering smile. "He's my nephew. He failed the college entrance exam. He came to join me. I'm helping him find a job." The man squinted. "A nephew with a 7-year age difference." Zhang Zinan laughed heartily, even with a hint of cajolery. "He really is my nephew, my sister's son. Even if I were stupid, I wouldn't be foolish enough to lodge him here, knowing you were coming. Okay, don't get angry. It's rare for you to come." I didn't hear the rest because they entered the bedroom and closed the door. Sitting on the old, worn-out sofa in the living room, I felt very uncomfortable. Soon, low voices came from the bedroom, then a sound that made my blood run cold. Gasping breaths, rustling of clothes, and the barely suppressed moans of a woman. Although I'd never had a girlfriend and was a complete virgin, I wasn't unfamiliar with those sounds from my hometown. When I was little, the adults in the village secretly watched porn VCDs, and we kids would pile up at the window to spy. At the time, I didn't understand what they were doing, but those images made my heart race and took my breath away. As I grew up, I understood that it was love, but knowing is one thing. And when that sound actually rang in my ears, especially when one of the protagonists was my so-called little aunt, the embarrassment and shame overwhelmed me. To escape this suffocating atmosphere, I fled the house and sat on the steps at the entrance, my mind blank. A black Buick Regal with license plate, Jiang, a 70001, was parked in front of the door. A young man stood by the driver's seat, smoking a cigarette. When he saw me come out, he paused, then approached to scrutinize me. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" I answered honestly, "This is my aunt's house." "Your aunt?" The young man softened, smiled at me, and offered a cigarette. "Ah, your nan's nephew? I thought you were some jerk trying to hit on my boss's wife. My mistake, my mistake. Here, have a cigarette." I waved my hand to refuse. I don't smoke, and I don't drink either. The young man crouched beside me and teased himself. A man out in the world, neither smoking nor drinking, that won't do. He introduced himself as Li Sheng, his boss's driver. The middle-aged man who had just entered the house was his boss. I couldn't help but ask, "Is he my uncle?" After hearing that, Li Sheng had a strange expression and patted my shoulder with an ambiguous smile. "In a way, yes, but I can't say more. Ask your aunt." With that, he stubbed out his cigarette and returned to the car. Shortly after, the door opened. The middle-aged man came out adjusting his collar, completely ignoring my presence. Just before getting into the car, he suddenly turned around and asked coldly, "What's your name?" Trinity nodded, got in, and left. This pressure was like facing the principal at school, suffocating. I went back into the house, and Zhang Zinan was coming out of her room. She had changed into a short floral dress. Her height of 168 centimeters made her legs appear straight and long. Due to the intense exercise, she was sweating heavily, and her delicate oval face was slightly flushed. She raised her hands to tie up her hair, and with the movement of her arms, the skirt lifted slightly, revealing for a moment a graceful curve that made this ardent young man blush, turning his gaze away in embarrassment. Zhang Zinan noticed my embarrassment, and an amused smile appeared at the corner of her lips. She approached the sofa and sat down, elegantly crossing her legs, arms folded across her chest, looking at me with interest. "You've never had a girlfriend?" I lowered my head, looking at my feet. "No, even during my studies, I haven't had one." "No, so you're still a little virgin." She laughed softly, with a hint of mockery in her voice. Then she turned serious and said, "Sister Hong helped me a lot back then. I can put you up, but there's one condition. Treat what you saw today as if you saw nothing. Otherwise, pack your things and leave." I nodded quickly. Got it. My apartment is a 2-bedroom, no extra room. You'll have to sleep on the floor in the living room. That's fine. I sleep on a bamboo mat at home too, I said hastily. For someone like me who grew up poor, where I sleep doesn't matter. What matters is being able to stay. Zhang Zinan stood up. Wait for me to change. I'll take you to dinner. Tomorrow I'll find you a job. I instinctively asked, and won't Uncle be coming home for dinner? Zhang Zinan paused, turned to me, as if she had just heard a joke. Uncle? What uncle? She looked at my youthful face and laughed bitterly. He's not your uncle. Those words pierced my heart like a thorn. Dinner took place at a family restaurant. Zhang Zinan ordered braised pork ribs, braised fish, and tomato egg drop soup. Strangely, she didn't even touch a single bite. She just sat there silently watching me eat. Aunt, aren't you eating? I asked cautiously. I'm not hungry. You eat, she replied with a smile. I look at the shiny, fatty pieces of meat before me. My throat tightens. In the countryside, my mother is in poor health, the family is in debt, and we can only eat meat once every 6 months. When I was little, when we ate dumplings with cabbage and diced meat, I couldn't swallow them. I kept the meat dices in my mouth to eat them all together at the end. The meat was so fragrant. At first, I tried to remain reserved, but after a few pieces, hunger completely overcame my reason, and I started devouring them as if I wanted to lick the plate clean. Zhang Zinan watched my ridiculous way of eating, a complex emotion flickering in his eyes. At home, we rarely eat meat. I stopped eating, lowering my head in shame. Aunt, am I eating too much? No, it was all for you, she said, waving her hand. But she said to herself, this child, how long has it been since he last had meat? She asked curiously. When was the last time you ate meat? I thought about it. I think it was at New Year's. You're lying to me. It's already July. Zhang Zinan looked at me skeptically. I quickly explained. It's true. My mother is in poor health. The medical expenses have drained our savings, and we still owe tens of thousands in debt. She says she doesn't like meat, so at home we only eat porridge and dried radishes. Sometimes at noon we stew green beans or napa cabbage with tofu skin. As I spoke, my eyes lit up. That tofu skin is delicious. It's my favorite, braised napa cabbage with tofu skin. Zhang Zinan laughed and deliberately teased me. I don't like tofu skin. I like meat. I froze, staring at this incredibly beautiful woman, and hesitantly blurted out. Then when I have money, I'll buy meat for Andy. Zhang Zinan was stunned for a moment, then burst out laughing. All right, I'll wait for the day you buy me meat. In reality, she was thinking. Seeing how serious and sincere I was, she hesitated to recommend me internally to work at Dinghong Jizuan, a high-end nightclub. As long as one's appearance is passable, even just handing out towels to customers, you can earn 10,000 a month. But she hesitated again. The nightlife was like a big dye vat, afraid she wouldn't be able to control herself. So she started telling me about working in the factory, base salary 390, 12-hour shifts, working hard for a month, could earn 700 to 800. Hearing this number, my eyes lit up. 700 to 800 a month. That's not bad. Zhang Zinan looked at me in surprise. Are you really that dumb? Or just pretending? Even if you live at my place without paying rent, you still need to eat, don't you? I muttered. Eating doesn't cost much. Seeing my earnest expression, a chord struck in Zhang Zinan's heart a few years ago. She had been just as naive, thinking that with hard work she could settle in this city. But now, there was no turning back. You can only move forward, never backward. After the meal, Zhang Zinan took me to the convenience store to buy daily necessities: towel, toothbrush, rattan mat. I silently noted the price of each item, totaling 65 yuan. When she wanted to get a summer blanket for 25 yuan, I firmly refused. When I left, my mother had only given me 200 yuan. After paying for the transportation, I had only 130 yuan left in my pocket. Every cent had to be spent sparingly. It's so hot. I can sleep without a blanket. Zhang Zinan understood my embarrassment. She didn't insist on paying for me, but silently preserved the dignity that remained to me as a man. Back home, after explaining the precautions to take, she left for work. With her departure, the awkwardness in the room dissipated. Curiously, I observed this unfamiliar house in this city, especially the white, flush toilet. It was the first time I had seen such a thing, and I was extremely intrigued. I turned on the TV, and the on-demand channel was showing Digimon and Tom and Jerry in a dialect version. After watching for 2 hours, I grew sleepy. So I spread out the bamboo mat and fell asleep on the floor in the living room. At night, in a half-asleep state, I heard the sound of the door opening. A smell mixed with alcohol and perfume hit my nostrils, and the next moment, an icy, stumbling foot landed heavily on my nose. Before I could even cry out in pain, a soft and plump body crashed onto me with a shriek directly onto my body. The intense pain made me gasp, and I stood frozen, unable to say a word. A few minutes later, the light was turned on. Zhang Zinan, who had drunk quite a bit that evening, had a delicate oval face flushed with alcohol, even her neck tinged with pink. She crouched gracefully beside me, her breath carrying the scent of wine, and asked softly, her voice like orchid-scented air, "Are you okay? Does it hurt?" Zhang Zinan looked a bit embarrassed. After work, she had momentarily forgotten there was an extra person at home. As soon as she entered, she kicked off her high heels, as usual, and headed toward the bedroom in the dark. But after just a few steps, she stepped on someone underfoot. Then she lost her balance completely and fell onto me. Hearing Zhang Zinan's words, I quickly waved my hand and said, it's fine. It doesn't hurt anymore." "Really doesn't hurt?" Zhang Zinan lowered her head and subtly glanced at my private area below. When she lost her balance and fell, her elbow had pressed against that spot, which was why I had been in so much pain earlier that I couldn't speak. But feeling very awkward, I instinctively closed my legs and quickly said, "Really doesn't hurt. It's good that it doesn't hurt." Zhang Zinan sighed in relief and, finding it amusing that I had my legs clamped together, couldn't help but say with a smile, "Why are you so nervous? Are you afraid your aunt will take advantage of you?" No. I quickly waved my hand again, then lowered my voice and said shyly, "I just feel embarrassed." Zhang Zinan found this even more entertaining. It was way more fun than putting on a mask at work to deal with those scheming scumbags full of dirty tricks. She teased, "What's there to be embarrassed about? What will you do when you have a girlfriend in the future?" I glanced at Zhang Zinan and didn't dare to respond. When I was a kid, my elders often joked like that too, saying they'd give me some girl my age as my wife. I always felt terribly embarrassed. Luckily, Zhang Zinan didn't push me any further. After seeing that I was fine, she chatted with me for a while, then took a nightgown from the bedroom, took a shower, and went into the bathroom. The sound of water showering came from the bathroom. I was lying on the straw mat when, for some reason, I heard the sound of flushing water and suddenly couldn't fall asleep. After struggling internally for a while, driven by intense curiosity, I mustered the courage to lift my head and glance toward the bathroom. The door above the bathroom was frosted glass. I couldn't see inside at all. I could only see a vague, blurry silhouette. Then, after Zhang Zinan came out of the bathroom, wiping his hair with a towel, I quickly turned my head to the side, my heart pounding like a drum, closed my eyes, and pretended to be asleep until Zhang Zinan entered his room. Only then did I breathe a sigh of relief and open my eyes again. And at that very moment, Zhang Zinan came out of the room again and asked me, while wiping his hair, "By the way, are you hot? If you are, I'll buy you an electric fan tomorrow." "Not hot. Not hot at all. It's just right for sleeping." I panicked when I heard that buying a fan would cost money again. "All right then." Zhang Zinan didn't insist. He went back to his room, grabbed a thin blanket, and tossed it to me. "The temperature will drop at night. Cover your stomach with it so you don't catch a cold." "Thank you, Auntie," I said gratefully to Zhang Zinan. Zhang Zinan looked at me and shook her head, thinking that I was just a young man who had just entered society and was too easily moved. So instead of going back to her room to sleep, she crouched in front of me, reached out her finger, gently flicked my forehead, and said with a light laugh, "Little fool, it's good to have a grateful heart, but don't easily give your heart away for small favors, got it? Otherwise, you might not even know when someone has sold you out." "Auntie, I'm not dumb. I'm already 18. I said to Zhang Zinan seriously. All right, you're 18, a little adult. It's late now, I'm going to sleep. You should get some rest too." Zhang Zinan was amused by my serious expression, but she didn't insist that I understand this truth right away. People can't be taught by words they learn from experience. Years of social experience had taught Zhang Zinan 2 survival rules. First, don't argue with people. Winning brings no benefit, and losing only makes you furious. Second, don't trust others easily, don't be overly warm-hearted, and keep a sense of distance from people. But at that time, I had none of these insights. Like a blank slate, I left the poor small county town of Xiangshui, knowing nothing, and plunged headlong into what was called the big dying vat of society. In just under 20 years of experience, I witnessed the complexity and cruelty of human nature, climbed to peaks, and fell into valleys. After Zhang Zinan left, I also went to sleep with the beautiful hope of making money, only wishing for dawn to come quickly so I could find a job and earn 700 or 800 yuan a month and give the money to my family at the end of the year to pay off debts. The next day, I woke up very early. Seeing that my aunt was still asleep, I didn't disturb her. I quietly left the house and went to Yangshan Commercial Street, where we had eaten the day before. There were many people in the morning. Many people wearing factory uniforms were riding bicycles and buying breakfast. At that time, I was like a country bumpkin, curious about everything. There were many foods I had never seen. In the end, I spent 3 yuan to buy something called a multigrain pancake. It was very tasty, crispy, but a bit expensive. 3 times a day would be 9 yuan, and that's 270 a month. But my monthly salary is only about 700 or 800, and after deducting 270, the rest not much left. No wonder Auntie said eating alone would cost a lot each month. I can't eat like this next time. I took out the money I had and counted it. I had only 62 yuan left. After deciding to skip breakfast from now on, I put the money away and headed to the agency. By the time I arrived, many people were already waiting there. The wages were just as Andy had said. The base salary was 390 per month. Overtime on weekdays paid 1.5 times and double time on weekends. It matched my expectations perfectly. I was excited, so I followed the crowd and handed over my ID card. Then, at 9:30, the agency took us in a van to a large industrial park as factory cafeteria. Only then did I realize that there were multiple labor agencies bringing people here. There were many agencies. Fortunately, the interview went smoothly and I was hired. But what I didn't expect was that after the factory HR told me I could start work after the physical exam, the agency boss came to me and asked for 200 yuan as a service fee. It was only then that I realized why he had collected everyone's ID cards before we left. But he never mentioned anything about a service fee before we set off. I didn't pay any money, and I don't have any. Without a word, I went back to the agency, found the boss, and said to him, "I don't want a job anymore. Give me back my ID card." The boss was a man in his early 30s, wearing a black t-shirt with tattoos exposed on his arms. Seeing that I wanted my ID, he held it in his hand, tapped it lightly, and looked me up and down with a half smile. "You say you're quitting just like that? Why didn't you say that before you went?" I argued, "You didn't mention any agency fee this morning." "No agency fee? Do you think I run a charity?" The agency boss sneered, glancing at me, his tone turning harsh. "Stop wasting words. Give me 200 yuan, or else your ID stays here. Without your ID, you won't find any job." I pulled out the only 62 yuan left in my pocket and tried to reason with him. "I only have 62 yuan left, and I still need to eat. I don't have enough to give you 200. That's your problem. If you don't have money, go borrow from someone." The agency boss glanced at me, held my ID card in his hand, and refused to give it back. Seeing this, the others who had been looking for work with me dared not intervene. They all paid up and took their IDs from the boss. I stood before the agency boss, utterly humiliated, feeling as if everyone was staring at me. Blood rushed to my head instantly. Overwhelmed by intense emotions, my adrenaline surged, and I began trembling uncontrollably. I looked up at the agency boss and reached out, agitated, saying, "Give me back my ID card." At that time, almost everyone running a labor agency in Xinjiang was someone with street connections. None of them were simple. Seeing me get worked up, the agency boss was amused. He also wanted to make an example of me to scare the job seekers in his shop, to show them that even a dragon must coil and a tiger must crouch when they step into his territory. Even if he could return my ID card, he simply refused to give it back and got defiant with me. The agency boss sneered at me and said rudely, "I won't give it to you. What are you going to do about it?" I held back my anger, staring at the agency boss. "Are you going to give me back my ID card or not?" I said, "No. Are you deaf? If you've got the balls, show me what you've got." The agency boss shoved me, still cursing under his breath. "You motherfucking little punk, still putting on airs in front of me? Let's see what you can do." At that moment, my blood rushed to my head. I'm not stupid. My ID card is essential for finding a job out here. Without my ID, I can't go anywhere. There's no way I'd come all the way to the big city only to slink back home on a bus to get a replacement. Just then, a girl around my age hesitated for a moment then came over, grabbed my arm, and whispered to me, "Don't be impulsive. It's just 200 yuan. If you don't have it, I'll lend it to you. You can pay me back when you find a job. Don't fight him, you'll get hurt." Her name was Li Yan. She was in the same batch of interviews as me that morning. She was applying for a quality inspector position. We'd exchanged a few words. She knew these agency bosses were all thugs, and ordinary people who fought them never came out ahead. The agency boss had flinched when I suddenly raised my fist, but when he saw me being held back, he stared at me with a sneer, his eyes full of contempt. "If you don't have the balls, then stop acting tough in front of me." With that, he held up my ID card and waved it in front of my face. "If you had just given me the 200 bucks obediently, I would have given you back your ID. But now, even if you give me the money, I won't fucking give it to you. If you've got the guts, come and get it from me yourself. I don't need your money." I never even thought of borrowing money from Li Yan. When I saw the agency boss dangling my ID in front of me and refusing to give it back, I was shaking with anger. I broke free from Li Yan and threw a punch right at the agency boss. The agency boss didn't expect me to actually throw a punch. Caught off guard, I knocked him to the ground with that punch, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Breathing heavily, I yelled at him angrily, "Give me back my ID right now. Fuck your mother." The agency boss was in no mood to listen at that point. Embarrassed and humiliated in front of everyone, he scrambled to his feet, face burning, and charged at me with a hideous expression. He wasn't the only one in the agency. There were also two young guys in their early 20s, wearing black t-shirts and jeans. During the interview, the boss had them stay at the agency waiting for job seekers. These two drove us to the interview. Just now, the two of them had been watching the drama with smirks. Now that they saw me trading blows with the agency boss, the two of them immediately cursed and rushed over to punch and kick me. I was no match for the three of them alone. Before long, I was pinned to the ground, getting kicked and punched all over. My whole body ached, but I didn't care. I just kept trying to get up and demand my ID card from the agency boss. Before I started looking for a job, I didn't understand. But after going to the factory for a round of interviews, I already figured out what was going on. The job the agency boss arranged for me was a punch press operator completely unskilled. In other words, as long as you had all your limbs, the factory would take you. Originally, as long as I didn't go to work, I wouldn't have to pay the agency fee at all. And it wasn't that I didn't want to pay the agency fee, I simply had no money. Even though my mom only gave me 200 yuan to leave home, that 200 yuan was the leftovers from her medical expenses. How could I easily give away the money she gave me? But the agency boss's temper flared up too. Relying on the two guys helping him, he kicked me down and pointed at me, cursing ferociously. "Fuck you. Don't even think about getting your ID card back." I said it. "Do whatever you want, call the cops if you like. It won't change a damn thing. You blind bastard." Young as I was, and stubborn too, I wasn't stupid. Seeing that I couldn't possibly snatch my ID card from the three of them on my own, I left without a word and headed to the general store where I bought the straw mat yesterday. A cleaver cost 15 bucks. I paid for it, leaving me with $47 in my pocket. Then, cleaver in hand, I walked back to the agency in silence. Inside the agency, the group of job seekers were still whispering about what had just happened. The agency boss, seeing me leave, thought I'd back down. He snorted, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and started bragging to his two lackeys to save face. That little punk comes strutting into my place and thinks he can just take his ID card from me? If I let him, then I, Leon, won't be able to hold my head up in the high-tech zone anymore. Haha, I'd welcome a few more clueless troublemakers so I can have a good beating. The agency boss's two lackeys, cigarettes dangling from their lips, laughed with a troublemaker's glee. The next moment, they suddenly heard a commotion outside. Turning around, they saw me, covered in wounds, silently walking in with a knife in hand. Everyone I passed by fearfully made way. Seeing this, the three of them instantly lost their smiles, their hair standing on end. The agency boss, Leon, also felt his adrenaline surge. But since he was somewhat known on Yangshan Commercial Street, he found it humiliating to back down easily. His wishful thinking also made him believe I wouldn't actually slash him with a knife, that I was just using it to scare him. Heh, bringing a knife over? Who are you trying to scare? If you got guts, just... So the agency boss, trying to save face, snorted and started cursing at me mockingly. But before he could finish his cursing, I raised the knife and slashed at him. The agent's scalp instantly tingled with terror. Forgetting about saving face, He immediately dodged to the side. Bang! My knife struck the desk behind him, the blade carving a deep gash into its surface. The agency boss was drenched in cold sweat from a rush of adrenaline, never imagining I would actually come after him with a knife over 200 yuan. Furious, he wanted to curse at me. Was it really worth it for just 200 bucks? But when he saw me chasing after him with a knife, before he could even get the curse out, he forgot all about saving face and turned to run out of the store. And the commercial street was crowded with people. He vanished in a flash, not even looking back once. Seeing that I couldn't find him, I angrily picked up the knife and returned to the agency. The people who had been watching in the store, afraid of being caught in the crossfire, had already fled outside in fright. The two young men who had just punched and kicked me, but hadn't had time to escape, froze instantly in fear when they saw me return. "Where's my ID card?" I asked, gripping the kitchen knife tightly, my blood boiling as I confronted them. The young man who had earlier been hoping for someone to cause trouble so he could beat them up could no longer muster any arrogant expression. Pointing outside, he said in a trembling voice, "Your ID card is with Brother Young." At the entrance of the agency, the commercial street was bustling with people. Every passerby kept a certain distance from me and gave me appraising looks. The two young men in the shop also poked their heads out from time to time to see if I had left. "It's evening now. Don't wait any longer. The agency boss won't come back. How about I treat you to dinner?" Lian saw me squatting at the agency entrance from noon until evening. Unable to bear seeing me wait like this, she kindly started to persuade me. I still stared at the agency entrance and said stubbornly, "No, I have to wait for him. My ID is still with him. But with you holding a knife, he wouldn't dare come back." Lian sighed at me. At noon, when she saw me suddenly swing the knife at the agency boss, she was also startled. For a long time afterward, she didn't dare to approach me on her own. Instead, she tried talking to me from a distance. Seeing that my attitude towards her was still relatively friendly, she finally stayed. Lian hadn't offended me. She was the first stranger who was kind to me since I arrived in Xinjiang. Of course, I wouldn't take my anger out on her. After hearing her words, I hesitated for a moment and said, "But without the knife, I can't beat them. They outnumber me." As soon as I finished speaking, there was a clattering sound. The agency boss's two lackeys pulled down the rolling shutter, looking like they were closing up shop. As they did, they kept glancing in my direction. Seeing this, I panicked and quickly walked over with the kitchen knife, demanding angrily, "What are you doing? Closing up already?" The two young men were startled when I stood up with the knife, taking a step back to keep their distance. One of them, eyeing the knife warily, spoke to me. I absolutely couldn't accept the agency closing and snapped, "Then what about my ID card?" "Your ID is with the boss. There's nothing we can do about it," the young man said cautiously, watching me. Inside, he was probably cursing his luck this lunatic had been squatting outside the shop with a kitchen knife all afternoon, scaring off anyone looking for work. Hardly anyone dared to come in, and they figured they might as well close early. It wasn't a stretch to think a madman was lurking at the door. That's why they were shutting down so early. But the young man didn't want to start a fight. He'd seen me burst in with that knife earlier and swing at the boss, nearly pissing himself in fear. I said nothing in response. The two young men, seeing that I wasn't saying anything and couldn't figure out what I meant, slowly backed away and left. Once they were a short distance from me, they immediately quickened their pace and soon disappeared into the crowd. Yangshan Commercial Street at night was bustling with activity. The few hundred meters of the street were packed with people, mostly workers from nearby factories who had just gotten off work, coming out to buy food and stroll around. But at that moment, looking at the lively hustle and bustle of the mortal world before me, I felt an indescribable frustration. Not only had I failed to find a job, but I had even lost my ID card. "Chenin," Lian's voice sounded in my ears at that moment. I snapped back to reality, looked at her, composed myself, and said gratefully, "Thank you for today." "Thank me for what?" "For being willing to lend me 200 yuan. I was genuinely grateful to Lian. I remember the scene at noon very clearly. When the agency boss looked at me mockingly, everyone stood far away watching, and only Li Yin came out and said she would lend me 200 yuan to get my ID card back from the boss. "But you didn't take my money. Even if I didn't take it, you were still willing to lend it to me, and I should still be grateful. I didn't expect you to be such a nice person." Li Yin laughed at this. Her impression of me greatly improved. Then she looked me over, her beautiful eyes flickering and said with amusement, "You're pretty good looking. So how could you bring yourself to swing a knife at someone? What if you actually hurt them?" I didn't answer. I never even thought about that. I only knew I had to get my ID card back. Lian could tell I probably didn't have much money on me, so she dropped the subject and offered to treat me to a meal. But I didn't want a woman to pay for my meal, so I told Lian I wasn't hungry and didn't want to eat. Seeing that I wouldn't go eat, Lian had no choice. She thought for a moment, then suddenly asked me, "By the way, what's your phone number?" "I don't have a cell phone. Not even a little smart." "Not that either." I shook my head. Lian was at a loss when she realized I had neither a cell phone nor a little smart. "Then how will I find you later? Where do you live now?" "I'm living with my aunt right now." Without thinking much, since Lian asked where I lived, I told her my current address. Lian noted down the address, relieved, and smiled at me. "I'll head back now. I have a medical checkup tomorrow, so I'll come find you to hang out when I'm free." But just before she left, Lian came back and asked if I had a notebook. Seeing that I didn't, she told me to hold out my hand and wrote a string of phone numbers on my palm. Under the night sky, her face slightly flushed as she said it was her number and told me to remember it. Then she walked away with light steps. After Li Yin left, I sat back down on the ground in front of the agency, unsure what to do. I knew that even if I couldn't get my ID back, I could always go back home and get a replacement. But the thing was, before I left, I promised my parents I'd earn a lot of money. If I went back now, without even starting, I'd feel incredibly ashamed and pathetic. Most importantly, I knew my family didn't have much money. The 200 yuan I took before leaving was almost everything we had. Going home would mean my family would have to scrape together travel expenses for me again. Thinking about that, I looked up at the agency's sign, my gaze turning resolute. No matter what, I had to get my ID back from the agency boss tomorrow. And at that very moment, the sound of a woman's high heels approached me from a distance. I looked up and saw a tall, elegant woman in a black bodycon dress standing in front of me. It was none other than my aunt, Zhang Zinan. As soon as we met, she began to question me. "Why didn't you come home?" "And I asked you why you didn't come home." I was just about to explain when Zhang Zinan cut me off expressionlessly. I was already feeling wronged because someone had taken my ID card. Seeing my aunt questioning me coldly, all the grievances I'd been holding back suddenly surged up. Overwhelmed by emotion, I, a high school graduate who had just stepped into society, couldn't control my eyes as they reddened. Zhang Zinan hadn't expected that just a few sharp words from her would make my eyes red. She immediately couldn't bear to continue. Mainly, she was very angry. When she got up at noon and didn't see me, she thought I might have gone out to look for a job, so she would come home at night. But when evening came, I still hadn't returned home. To make matters worse, I didn't have a phone, so she couldn't call me even if she wanted to. How could she not be angry about that? "You're 18 years old and still crying? Aren't you embarrassed?" Zhang Zinan couldn't bear to keep such a harsh tone and continued. "Get up quickly. To find you, I went out of my way to ask that so-called uncle of yours to drive me out here." Hearing this, I looked up and saw not far away a black sedan quietly parked at the edge of the crowd. License plate, Jiang A70001. The windows were rolled up, making it impossible to see the people inside. To me, a car was something very high-end. Before getting in the car, Zhang Zinan paused when he saw the kitchen knife in my hand. "Where did you get that kitchen knife?" "I bought it." "Why did you buy a knife? Don't we have one at home?" Zhang Zinan muttered crossly, then whispered a word of caution for me to keep quiet in the car and just sit still in the front passenger seat. I nodded to show I understood, opened the passenger door, and got in. I first nodded to Li Sheng, whom I had spoken to yesterday, and then quietly addressed the middle-aged man sitting in the shadows in the back seat. Legs crossed with an imposing presence. "Hello, uncle." After I said that, I immediately sensed something was off. Not only did Li Sheng, who was about to start the car, glance at me in surprise. The middle-aged man also had a flash of surprise in his eyes, then turned his head to look at Zhang Zinan, who had just gotten into the car, his eyes showing a questioning look with a hint of depth. I also looked at Zhang Zinan helplessly, feeling like I had said something wrong, but not understanding what I'd said wrong. Seeing this, Zhang Zinan couldn't help but feel the urge to cover her face. What an idiot she had told him not to speak, and he still did. So she began explaining to the middle-aged man. "He just graduated from high school, he's still a kid and doesn't understand anything. He thought you were his uncle, so he called you that. Don't take it to heart. It's fine. He's not exactly wrong to call me that." The middle-aged man, seeing that Zhang Zinan didn't reveal his identity, let the depth in his eyes dissipate a lot. Then he looked at me with interest and asked with a chuckle, "Your name is Chunin, right?" "Yes," I nodded and quickly said to the middle-aged man. I didn't know why, but I felt a subconscious fear of him, and my speech was unconsciously tense. The middle-aged man noticed my nervousness and asked with a half-smile, "Don't be nervous. Didn't you just call me uncle? How could you be so reserved when talking to your own uncle?" After some time passed, I felt I had misjudged the middle-aged man. He was actually quite easy to talk to. So I relaxed and started answering his questions, and before long, I had revealed my entire family background. While the middle-aged man was questioning me, Zhang Zinan kept watching me nervously, afraid I might say something wrong to the man beside me, until the driver, Li Sheng, dropped us off at the doorstep and we got out of the car. Zhang Zinan watched the car drive away, then let out a sigh of relief. After that, she went home without looking back or saying a word to me. Back home, Zhang Zinan sat silently on the sofa, arms crossed, waiting for me to come in. The moment I entered, she first told me to close the door, then asked me with an icy stare, "What did I tell you before we got in the car?" To keep my talking to a minimum. "And what did you do?" I felt a bit wrong when I heard that. Because I hadn't spoken up on my own, it was Uncle who asked me, so I answered him. "What You still feel wronged? Did you see Shaoli say anything?" My aunt didn't give me a chance to explain and scolded me coldly. "Chunin, listen to me. If you can stay here, then stay. If you can't, then go back to wherever you came from and stop causing me trouble." The sudden reprimand caught me completely off guard. I couldn't understand why my aunt was suddenly so angry, especially on top of the grievance from earlier when someone withheld my ID card. Instantly, I felt so upset I couldn't speak. And I'm a proud person at heart. So I swallowed my bitterness and said to the strange woman in front of me, "Sorry, Aunt, for causing you trouble." With that, I turned to leave. "Stop right there." Zhang Zinuo saw I was really leaving and snapped at me. I froze in my tracks, but didn't turn around. I didn't want to cry, but I couldn't stop my eyes from welling up, feeling utterly wronged. "Are you getting a temper on me now?" Just then, Zhang Zinuo came up to me, stood in front of me, and said coldly, "Did you even say goodbye to me this morning when you left? Do you have any idea how worried I was? You're not around at noon, and you're not around at night either. If your mom suddenly calls and asks how you're doing, what am I supposed to tell her? And you're acting all wronged?" Zhang Zinan got angrier as she spoke. She didn't dare go out all afternoon, afraid that if she left, I might come back. It wasn't until evening that she had no choice but to call that man. She asked him to drive over and help find me. But was he someone you could just casually ask for help? Zhang Zinan knew well that Zhou Bin was the type who never showed his emotions. He seemed easygoing, but in reality, he was extremely suspicious. Once he was displeased with you, he would never say it outright. He just wouldn't contact you anymore. As for why you offended him, you'd have to figure it out yourself. And today, because of this little bastard in front of her, she broke her own rule and asked Zhou Bin for help. So of course Zhang Zinan was furious, seeing that I not only didn't realize my mistake, but also had the nerve to storm off. She poked my chest and said emotionally, "And you really think that just because you agreed to call him uncle, he's actually your uncle? Let me tell you, from now on, you better act like a mute in front of him, you hear me?" I heard her. I was feeling really wronged at first, but after my aunt's series of questions, I suddenly felt less wronged and realized I really had caused her trouble. So I felt a bit guilty too, seeing that I looked guilty as well. Zhang Zinan stopped talking and gave me a cold glance. "Have you eaten yet?" "No." "Come on, I'll take you out to eat." With that, Zhang Zinan was about to take me out to grab something to eat on the commercial street. "I don't want to eat." I stood still. Zhang Zinan asked, "Are you mad?" "No," I said to Zhang Zinan apologetically. "Aunt, I know I was wrong. I won't make you worry like this again. It's okay as long as you know you were wrong. How about I cook you some noodles?" Zhang Zinan had gone out of her way today over a small matter to find Zhou Bin, so she was in a bad mood and didn't want to go out. She took some noodles into the kitchen, cooked a bowl of tomato and egg noodles, and set on the table. Then she sat down beside the table, crossed her long, slender legs, lit a slim cigarette, brought it to her red lips, took a drag, and told me to come eat. I hadn't eaten anything except the morning's multi-grain pancake, and from noon until evening, I hadn't eaten at all. I was hungry, so I ate with great relish. Zhang Zinan glanced at me, seeing how much I was enjoying the food, and asked, "Spill it. What happened today?" Why didn't you come back all day? The agency boss took my ID card. I told him the whole story from beginning to end. So you just squatted outside his shop all afternoon? It was only then that Zhang Zinan understood why I hadn't come back all day. He frowned at me. For just 200 yuan? Was it worth it? You even pulled a knife. Just give it to him. As a man, don't dwell on trivial things. Don't waste energy on such insignificant matters. Got it? I lowered my head and said with a sense of inferiority, I don't have that much money. Zhang Zinan fell silent. He looked up at me wordlessly for a few seconds, then stubbed out his cigarette and stood up, saying, All right, go to bed early. Tomorrow I'll take you to get your ID back. Night had fallen. I lay on a straw mat, staring at Zhang Zinan's room. For a long time, I couldn't fall asleep. In the end, I mustered up the courage to go to her room door. Aunt, are you asleep? What is it? Zhang Zinan's voice came from inside the room. I asked through the door, Don't you have to go to work tonight? I was supposed to go, but I took leave to look for someone. Hearing her words, I immediately felt guilty, knowing she meant me, so I said softly, I am sorry, aunt. I didn't mean to. No need to apologize. It doesn't matter. Go to bed early. I'm going to sleep too. Okay, aunt. You rest early. Hearing Zhang Zinan's tone was not very good. I went back to the futon on the living room floor, but I still couldn't sleep. Actually, I wanted to tell Aunt not to come with me tomorrow to get my ID card. I can get it myself. I subconsciously felt that as a man, letting a woman help me seek justice felt strange. At the same time, I was afraid that Aunt would be bullied. The boss of that agency is not a good person, I could tell. He has tattoos showing in many places, obviously someone who runs with a rough crowd. So, I just laid down for a few minutes. When I got up again and went to Zhang Zinan's door, nervously knocking. But before I could say anything, the door opened. Zhang Zinan appeared in a pink spaghetti-strap dress, her legs shimmering under the moonlight, though her face showed a hint of impatience as she furrowed her brows at me. Are you going to sleep or not? If you have something to say, just say it, don't hem and haw. How about I go get my ID card myself tomorrow? I finally blurted out, speaking in a low voice to Zhang Zinan. That agency boss is a gangster. I'm afraid he'll bully you. Zhang Zinan looked me over. You tossed and turned all night just to tell me this? Yeah. Well, go back to sleep. Don't worry about things that aren't your concern. Just take care of yourself. Zhang Zinan shot me an annoyed glance, her tone equally harsh, then closed the door. After closing the door, Zhang Zinuo's eyes softened a lot. She returned to the bed, lit a slim cigarette, and held it between her slender fingers. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting a silhouette of her graceful curves, hazy and indistinct, as if draping her in a layer of silver gray. Bullying me? Zhang Zinuo thought of how I had stood hesitantly at the door just now, looking like a silly fool. She chuckled silently. You really underestimate your aunt, don't you? The next day, Zhang Zinuo got up early for once. Half asleep, she walked out of her room planning to wash up, only to see a certain someone lying shirtless on the living room floor, spread-eagled, sleeping soundly. Originally, Zhang Zinuo didn't intend to bother with him, but after accidentally glancing at me, a blush involuntarily rose on her face. Then, putting on a stern expression, she walked over and kicked me. Startled by the sudden kick, I quickly sat up from the straw mat and looked at Zhang Zinuo standing beside me with a confused expression. What are you just sitting there for? How ugly. Hurry up and wash up. I'll take you to get your ID card. Zhang Zinan glanced at me with feigned anger and said, then nonchalantly turned to wash up and brush her teeth, muttering to herself about the little bastard if I really recommended him to Ding Hong Supreme. He would probably be liked by quite a few wealthy women. I didn't understand what Zhang Zinan meant at first, but after realizing it, my face instantly flushed red with embarrassment. I quickly covered myself with my clothes while feeling annoyed inside. Why aren't you up washing up yet? Zhang Zinan finished brushing her teeth and came out of the bathroom. Seeing me still sitting there, she couldn't help but ask. I'll get up in a bit. I quickly sat up straight, shaking my head like a rattle, not daring to stand up at all. I only dared to get up after Zhang Zinan looked at me suspiciously a few times and went into her room. Then, while brushing my teeth, I kept thinking about this matter. I felt a bit like a pervert. So after brushing my teeth, I bowed my head and came to the door of Zhang Zinan's room to wait. As soon as she came out, I began apologizing, full of remorse. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, I don't know why, but this happens every morning when I wake up. As I spoke, I couldn't help my eyes starting to redden. I was especially afraid that Zhang Zinan would get angry with me and send me back to my hometown. Seeing how meek I looked, Zhang Zinan couldn't help but be amused, laughing until her stomach hurt. Then, suppressing her smile, she looked at me and asked, "You're in high school, haven't you taken a biology class?" "I have." "Didn't the book tell you the reason?" "It doesn't seem like it." I thought about it carefully and wasn't sure if the book had covered it. Then I looked at Zhang Zinan curiously and asked, "Aunt, what's really going on?" "Well, it's just," Zhang Zinan was about to say it, but when the words reached her lips, she found she couldn't say them either. Then, embarrassed and annoyed, she reached out and smacked my head. Ask, what's there to ask? You don't pay attention in class, and now you want to know? Am I your teacher?" Oh, I didn't understand why Aunt was angry, but since she said that, I wisely stopped asking. At the same time, I thought to myself that from now on, I'd cover myself with a blanket when I slept so I wouldn't make a fool of myself. This little bastard. Zhang Zinan felt relieved that I stopped asking. Then she looked up and down at the slightly dumb-looking young man in front of her and found that he was really good-looking, standing at 180 centimeters tall. His face was clean, his eyes clear. His figure was also good, not a trace of a belly. Not like those old men in Dinghong Supreme, whose bellies were as big as a 5-month pregnant woman's. Then Zhang Zinan told me to change shoes, and we would first get the ID cards back. Then Zhang Zinan realized something was wrong, because she saw me heading straight to the kitchen after she finished speaking. When I came out, there was already a kitchen knife in my hand. It was the same one I brought back last night. "What are you doing?" Zhang Zinan looked stunned. "Self-defense." I looked up at Zhang Zinan and said matter-of-factly, "That agency boss has 2 underlings. I can't beat the 3 of them. Yesterday, I was beaten by those 3. So what? What are you going to do with a knife? Go chop them up? Hurry up and put it back." But what? Do you obey me or not?" All right, seeing my aunt say that, I had no choice but to put the kitchen knife back. But as I watched her slender, graceful figure, I regretted buying the kitchen knife yesterday. If I had bought a fruit knife and hidden it in my pocket, she wouldn't have found it. Soon, my aunt and I arrived at the employment agency from yesterday. At the agency's door, the boss's lackey, who was about to take job seekers to a factory interview, saw me coming. His face changed instantly, and he ran into the store, breathing heavily to report to the agency boss. "Brother Young, it's bad. That lunatic who swung a cleaver at you yesterday is back." It wasn't just the lackey who was scared. The agency boss, Leon, was also terrified. Who the hell wouldn't be scared of that? Some reckless idiot charging at you with a kitchen knife. If he hadn't dodged fast enough yesterday, that knife would have been embedded in his chest. Actually, Leon hadn't gone far yesterday. He had been hiding 100 meters away from the agency, planning to come back after I left. But he never expected me to stubbornly sit there with the knife in hand from noon until night. That persistence was chilling. Even Leon wanted to come over and return my ID card, but in the end, he didn't dare to. That night, I went back and thought it over all night. Leon felt that this couldn't go on after all. He ran a shop as an agent, and this guy named Chun and kept sitting at the door with a knife, refusing to leave, which was bad for business. So early this morning, Leon put my ID card on the table and prepared 500 yuan to make peace. But I didn't know any of this. All I knew was that Leon had taken my ID card and hadn't come back all afternoon. Now that I saw him in the shop, my eyes were practically shooting fire, and I kept glancing at Leon and his 2 lackeys. I was thinking that if they dared to touch my aunt, then I would fight them to the death right then and there. Zhang Zinan didn't give a damn about some agency owner. She cast a cold glance at the boss, then turned back to confirm with me. "Was it him who took your ID card?" "Yes," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. Zhang Zinan looked at Leon, intending to have a talk and see if Leon would play ball. If not, then this middleman gig of his was as good as over. But what Zhang Zinan didn't expect was, Leon was surprisingly courteous. Seeing me and my aunt approach, he dared not even speak to me directly. Instead, he picked up the ID card he had prepared and ingratiated himself with my aunt, saying, "You're Chun An's girlfriend, right? Sorry about yesterday. I had a misunderstanding with him. Here's his ID card. I'll return it to you." With that, Leon pulled out another 500 yuan. This 500 yuan is compensation for him. Zhang Zinan glanced at the ID card and the cash in his hand, then at Leon, who was sweating on his forehead. He turned back to look at me, behind him, and asked Leon with a half smile, "Do he and I look like a couple?" Leon was taken aback for a moment, then said, "Yes, I'm her aunt." Then you must be really young. Li Yong quickly went along with the compliment. Zhang Zinan was both amused and exasperated by Li Yong's uncooperative attitude, so he stopped paying him any attention and took me to buy breakfast. I originally wanted to pay, but my aunt stopped me. Back home, Zhang Zinan lounged lazily on the sofa and told me to take the 500 yuan and the ID card. I don't want this money. I only took the ID card and didn't accept the cash. Zhang Zinan glanced at me and said, "Why won't you take it? This 500 yuan is compensation from him. Hurry up and take it." I don't want it. I still refused and said to Zhang Zinan, "I've been eating and drinking here without paying you anything. This 500 yuan is for you." Zhang Zinan said, both amused and speechless, "I don't need your 500 yuan. Then I won't take it either." I stood still, thinking to myself that I absolutely wouldn't accept the money. At the same time, I was quite happy, feeling like I had finally repaid my aunt. "All right then, I'll use this money to arrange a job for you where I work." Seeing this, Zhang Zinan didn't insist and stood up to put the money away. In the afternoon, Zhang Zinan took me out to order a few stir-fried dishes for a meal. After we ate, she bought a carton of soft-packed Zhonghua cigarettes and then hailed a taxi to take us to the entrance of a club called Dinghong Supreme. Having learned a lesson from last night, I now tried to ask fewer questions and say less, obediently following behind my aunt. But deep down, I was especially excited because my aunt said she was bringing me here to find a job. Soon, Zhang Zinan led me through a winding path, and we finally arrived at a man's office. The man was about 30 years old, wearing a shirt and suit, with his hair meticulously combed. "Sister Nan," the man called out respectfully as soon as he saw Zhang Zinan upon entering the door. Then he glanced at me and asked, "Is he the one looking for a job?" "Yes, he's my nephew. Please take good care of him." Zhang Zinan nodded and then shoved the carton of soft-packed Zhonghua she had bought earlier into the man's hands. "Someone just gave me a carton of cigarettes, and I don't like smoking soft Zhonghua anyway. Here, take it for yourself." "Sister Nan, you're too polite." The man was all smiles, saying polite words but still taking the cigarette. He then glanced at me, indicating no problem, he would take care of the work arrangements. But I was a bit curious. Clearly it was Aunt who bought the cigarettes herself, so why did she say someone gave them to her? But Aunt didn't give me a chance to ask. After handing me over to this man, she left, saying she wanted to go back to take a nap and would come back to work in the evening. And after Aunt left, the man, feeling satisfied, took out a pack of soft Zhonghua cigarettes, brought it to his nose to sniff, then asked if I smoked. When he learned I didn't, he lit one, sat on the table, and while puffing out smoke, asked me, "What's your name?" "Shunan." "That name sounds quite refined." The man smiled and then started introducing the work I would be doing. Through his introduction, I learned what kind of place Dinghong Supreme was. It was a nightclub, simply put, a place for guests to sing karaoke. It had 5 floors in total, with the 5th floor being management and training area. There is no 4th floor to avoid the homophone for death. The 4th floor was changed to the 3rd floor, and the original 1st floor lobby was changed to G. So the floors at Dinghong Supreme are only G, 1, 2, 3, and 5. The 3rd floor is for VIP private rooms. Ordinary people are not allowed on the 3rd floor, only VIP guests and senior staff can work there. Regular guests sing on the 1st and 2nd floors. But my job was to be a room attendant, commonly known as a boy attendant, a monthly salary of 850. Before starting, I needed a week of training, unpaid. The training covered standing posture, squatting posture, and shouting welcome with energy and spirit. 2 days into my training, 2 more colleagues joined me. One named Sun Ji Chao, 3 years older than me, and another named Zhang Wei, my same age. It was from getting to know these two that I learned something incredible. They had each paid 10,000 yuan to work as attendants. When I asked why, they told me that the room attendants at Dinghong Supreme get tips. And not just a little, it was common to earn over 10,000 a month. Hearing that, I suddenly perked up, and a week later, I am finally going to start my shift. As night fell before my shift began, the supervisor, Han Guangxing, called me, Sun Ji Chao, and Zhang Wei over to brief us on the do's and don'ts. Then he assigned Sun Ji Chao, who had worked as a host in other clubs before, to take me under his wing for my shift. Han Guangxing said to Sun Ji Chao, "Xiao Chun is working the night shift for the first time. Let him try serving customers in the private room first. You keep an eye from outside, and if there's anything he doesn't get, you teach him." Sun Ji Chao immediately perked up puffing out his chest and promising, "Don't worry, supervisor. With me here, there won't be any problems." That's good then. The supervisor nodded. Then he called me aside alone and said to me earnestly, "This is your first time on the job, and there's a lot you don't know yet. Start by serving in the regular rooms. Once you're more familiar, I'll let you serve on the third floor." After saying that, he patted me on the shoulder and smiled. "Don't worry, there will be plenty of chances to make money." "Thanks, Brother Han," I said to Han Guangxing gratefully. After a week here, I already knew that the VIP floor on the third level was not accessible to just anyone. Only some senior employees or particularly sharp waitstaff could go up there to serve. And on the third floor, you could basically get tips every day. A couple of days ago, a waiter named Su Ping saw a guest's shoelace was loose, immediately knelt down to tie it, and then the guest gave him a tip of 2,000 yuan. This incident got the other waiters and waitresses incredibly pumped up. The supervisor didn't take it seriously and said with a smile, "No need to thank me. We're all on the same team. When you start your shift later, just stay in the private room and do whatever the guest asks. If there's anything you don't understand, ask Sun Jichao. He's worked at other places and has more experience." After giving his instructions, the supervisor left. Soon, Sun Jichao and Zhang Wei came over. Sun Jichao glanced at me and asked, "What did the supervisor tell you?" I instinctively replied, "He said once I'm familiar with the work, he'll let me serve in the third floor private rooms." After I finished, both Zhang Wei and Sun Jichao looked at me with envy. Zhang Wei couldn't help but say, "Wow, and you're awesome. The supervisor actually assigned you to the third floor. The third floor has the most tips. You might even get $100 just for handing out towels." Sun Jichao nudged my shoulder and said to me with a warm smile, "Looks like the supervisor thinks highly of you. When you've made it big, put in a good word for me and get me up to the third floor too. I'll say what I can." I said to Sun Jichao, because when I first started, I was a blank slate. Without Sun Jichao and Zhang Wei, I wouldn't have learned so fast. Soon, it was time to start work. I followed Sun Jichao to our posts, wearing headsets. First, we stood in 2 rows with the veteran staff at the elevator entrance on the second floor, waiting for guests to arrive. When guests came up, the hostess at the downstairs entrance would use the walkie-talkie to tell us which private room to take them to. Then all I had to do was lead the guests to the private room. While waiting for guests, Sun Jichao deliberately stood in the same row as me and whispered the secret to getting tips from guests. "Chinin, when guests give you tips, don't refuse even if it's just 10 or 20 bucks. Got it?" Oh, why? I was stunned. Dozens of yuan was already a lot for me. During the previous week of training, to save money, I had walked back home after work every night. Sun Jichao said in a tone that suggested I didn't understand at all, "You're an idiot. If you accept small change like 10 or dozens of yuan, who would give you large bills? That lowers our class. You have to reject them and make it clear. Either don't tip at all or tip 100. We need to have standards." I understand. After hearing Sun Jichao, I thought he made a lot of sense. I gave him an okay gesture to show I remembered. At the same time, I felt ambitious, thinking about how much tip I could get tonight. Could it be 200? Oh my God, I didn't dare think further. If I kept thinking, I was afraid I'd laugh out loud from joy. Soon, a guest came out of the elevator. As I bent over to say, "Welcome," my earpiece rang with the hostess's voice telling me to take the guest to room 203. The guest who came out was a man around 40 years old, very thin, wearing glasses. Although I had practiced the process of leading guests to the room and serving them countless times, when I actually started serving the guest, I was extremely nervous. He stuttered as he spoke, but in the end, Sun Jichao smoothly and flatteringly led the guest to private room 203. By then, my nervousness had mostly subsided. I entered the private room and began serving the guests as I had practiced. The guest first ordered princesses, 3 in total. Each one was very beautiful. Then he ordered a bottle of Royal Salute foreign liquor, 1,888 yuan per bottle. By now I knew what Dinghong Supreme was, a place where men spend money for pleasure, so I wasn't surprised by this. It's just that the 3 princesses were dressed rather sexily. Their collars were so low that half of their fair skin was exposed. Their cleavage was deep, as if it might pop out at any moment. I couldn't help glancing occasionally. After receiving 2,000 yuan from the guest, I went to get the liquor. When I brought it back, I handed the remaining 112 yuan to the boss. The boss took the 100 yuan and didn't take the remaining 12. "Keep the rest for yourself." With that, the boss turned to flirt and chat with the three beautiful princesses beside him. But soon he noticed I hadn't left. I didn't leave because I remembered what Sun Jichao said, that if the guest gives you small change, you shouldn't take it, because then you'd be lowering your status. The boss won't give you a tip over 100 either. But I really wanted to take that 12 yuan tip. Every little bit counts. A few times before, I couldn't resist and bought breakfast, leaving me with only 29 yuan. In the end, even though I was hoping for a 100 yuan tip, I held back from the temptation of 12 yuan and waved my hand at the boss. Thanks, boss, but I don't want it. The guest was surprised, thinking I was afraid of getting caught for taking a tip privately. So he said, "It's fine, just take it. This is from me. Really, I don't want it." I still refused, fighting back my desire, my mind full of Sun Jichao's words. Don't take small change if you're going to take it. Make it 100. Otherwise, they'll look down on you and won't give you 100. Seeing that I absolutely wouldn't take it, the guest didn't force it and went back to drinking and chatting with the three beauties, occasionally rubbing his hand over their skirts and thighs back and forth. Then, there was the time I spent 200 yuan on snacks and was left with 23 yuan. I didn't take that either. I spent 200 yuan on 2 packs of soft zhonghua, 80 yuan each, and left the remaining 40 yuan behind. But my mood grew heavier. I stood near the doorway, silent. I was too short on money and too desperate for tips. Even 40 yuan no, even 12 yuan meant a lot to me. Strange though, I had clearly turned down the guests several times, yet they never gave me a 100 yuan tip, not even any spare change anymore. Just then, I heard a soft knock from behind. Turning around, I saw Sun Jichao peering through the glass of the door, waving at me. Once I stepped out, he spoke to me with an air of frustrated disappointment. "You don't know how to ask for tips. Here's the plan. You wait outside, I'll stay inside. When I get a tip, we'll split it 50-50. All right." I hesitated briefly before agreeing. As soon as I agreed, Sun Jichao went in while I stood in the hallway by the door. Still, I peeked through the glass from time to time, hoping to learn how he asked for tips. Sun Jichao was indeed a seasoned pro. Inside, he wore a fawning smile, pouring tea for the guests and handing them hot towels to wipe their hands. But the guests still didn't give him any tip. Sun Jichao wasn't in a hurry. Since the customer hadn't given him a tip, he stood to the side, gently swaying to the music in the private room, until the customer gave him money again to buy some snacks, at which point he cheerfully stepped forward again. That's not the point. The point is that after Sun Jichao bought the snacks, he kept all the change the customer gave him, which was only about 30 plus yuan in total. This left me a bit puzzled. Why did he tell me not to take tips under 100 yuan, but then take them himself? But soon I convinced myself. I had turned down small change tips many times before, and the customers never gave me a 100 yuan tip. If I hadn't refused those times, I might have scraped together 100 yuan in tips by now. So Sun Jichao accepting the change was actually right. At 1 a.m., the drunk customer finally got up to leave. He had been very happy tonight, and before leaving, he took out 10,000 yuan and gave a 500 yuan tip to each of the three princesses. Then he gave 200 to the song request princess. And then he gave 100 to Sun Jichao. The rule at Dinghong Supreme is that default tips are 5 yuan for a hostess, 2 yuan for a karaoke hostess, and 1 yuan for a room attendant, where 1 yuan actually means 100 renminbi. But I switched to working the floor with Sun Jichao halfway through, so I didn't get a single tip. But I didn't get discouraged. I was even somewhat happy. I calculated that Sun Jichao, including the last 100 yuan, must have received at least over 200 in tips today. When he splits it with me, I'd get over 100 yuan. Over 100 yuan, I was quite satisfied. But when we left the private room, Sun Jichao didn't split the money with me. I thought he might wait until the end of our shift to split it. When I got to the changing room, I saw Zhang Wei, who also started working today, and asked him how he did. Zhang Wei said, "I just started and haven't even gotten into a private room. So how could I have any tips? Only those who attend private rooms get tips. You attended one, so you must have gotten quite a bit, at least 100, right?" I hemmed and hawed and didn't say anything. I was too embarrassed to say that I hadn't gotten a single tip, and even the last 1 yuan guaranteed tip had been taken by Sun Jichao. So after changing clothes, I waited for Sun Jichao, eagerly hoping he would share over 100 yuan with me, even going so far as to proactively talk to him. But after he changed, he just hummed a tune and walked away alone. At this point, even as slow-witted as I am, I could tell Sun Jichao had no intention of sharing the tips with me. Leaving the club, I sat alone on the steps, my mind full of what had happened tonight. I just couldn't understand why Sun Ji Chao wouldn't let me accept small change tips, yet he took them himself. Why? When we agreed to split the tips evenly, did he not give me my share? And the guaranteed 100 yuan tip from the private room that originally belonged to me, he didn't split that either. Thinking about this, I took out the remaining 29 yuan from my pocket, including 4 1 yuan coins that had been warming there for days because I couldn't bear to spend them. I felt deeply wronged. It felt like I had trusted someone and they had played me for a fool. That feeling was awful. Just then, a faint scent of body fragrance mixed with the smell of wine wafted over, followed by a slender figure who stood beside me, placed a hand on my head, and said to me with a tipsy tone, "What's wrong, young man? You look a bit unhappy." What came into view was a stunning face flushed with a rosy glow. The speaker was none other than my aunt, Zhang Zinan. She was wearing a tight, black bodycon dress, and with the help of high heels, her figure appeared particularly tall and elegant, her legs looking especially fair. But she seemed to have drunk quite a lot, unsteady on her feet, swaying slightly. I quickly stood up and supported her, told her I wasn't unhappy, and then looked at my aunt with concern and said, "Aunt, you've had too much to drink." "Have I had too much?" Zhang Zinan suddenly leaned close to me, her beautiful eyes hazy with drink as she asked. Her eyes were dazed, her red lips slightly parted, and she breathed the smell of alcohol onto my face. Actually, I used to really hate the smell of alcohol, but strangely, I don't hate the smell of alcohol on my aunt's lips. I even think it smells quite nice, like a fruity scent. It makes me want to taste it. But the next second, I was startled and quickly avoided my aunt's gaze, saying, "You're really drunk. You can't even stand straight." "Oomph, you're the one who's drunk. Let's go home." Zhang Zinan was clearly very dissatisfied with my answer. She staggered and reached out to poke my forehead with her finger, then told me to get in a taxi with her to go home. And at this time, every day, there would be many taxis queued up on the roadside in front of Dinghong Supreme. When the front car picked up a passenger and drove off, the car behind would move forward a bit to take the next customer in order. After getting in the car, Zhang Zinan quickly fell asleep. At this moment, I panicked. After midnight in Xinjiang, taxis have a night surcharge over 3 yuan per kilometer, with a starting fare of 10 yuan. At first, it was okay, the fare didn't change within the starting distance. But after a few minutes, the number started jumping wildly. I watched helplessly as the number on the meter quickly jumped from 10 to 20, then 21, 22, 23, climbing higher and higher, and my heartbeat kept pace with it. I only had 29 yuan total on me. Seeing it hit 29, I hurriedly shouted driver, "I'm here," and told him to stop, afraid that if he stepped on the gas one more time, the meter would jump to 30, and then I wouldn't be able to pay. Meanwhile, my aunt was completely drunk. As a guy, there was no way I could wake her up to pay. "Wake up, wake up!" I quickly shook my aunt awake. "Are we there?" Zhang Zinan's eyes fluttered open, dazed. Not daring to meet her gaze, I guiltily said, "Almost there, but I feel a bit carsick. I want to get out and walk." Luckily, where we got off wasn't far from where we were staying. There was only about a kilometer left. Zhang Zinan, having barely woken up, stepped out of the car, walked a couple of steps, and then refused to go further. She stood there, her beautiful eyes glaring drunkenly at me as she started throwing a tantrum. "I'm not walking. What's wrong? My feet hurt. What now?" I looked at her, feeling at a loss and deeply guilty. If it weren't for my lack of money, we wouldn't have had to get off early. At the same time, I cursed that bastard Sun Ji Chao in my heart. What a sneaky son of a bitch. Taking advantage of me, fresh out of society and knowing nothing. "I don't care. I'm not going anywhere." Zhang Zinan kicked off her high heels directly, her feet in black stockings stepping onto the concrete road. And at that very moment, a black car pulled over by the roadside. The rear window rolled down, revealing Zhou Bin's profile. He glanced at me and Zhang Zinan, then said, "Get in." The driver, Li Sheng, was at the wheel. I sat in the passenger seat and glanced at my uncle-in-law in the back. I still didn't know his name, only that no matter what happened, he remained calm and composed. He was also dressed very formally. He gave me the vibe of the village party secretary back home, but with a more genuine aura. The lighting inside the car was very dim. Only the silhouettes of uncle and aunt could be seen. Aunt's bodycon skirt hugged her hips tightly, outlining her curvaceous figure. She was in a great mood, seeing Zhou Bin, her face flushed. Her beautiful eyes were dazed, and charming for drunkenness. Her rosy lips parted slightly, carrying a hint of alcohol, and her voice was soft and sweet as she cooed to Zhou Bin. "Hubby, are you missing me?" Zhou Bin remained calm, letting Zhang Zinan cling to him like a pendant, and said to her, "You're drunk. Husband missed you." Zhang Zinan said to Zhou Bin in a dazed, charming manner, then chuckled, raising her slender fingers and speaking happily, tipsy. "But I'm still happy you came today. When you're not around, I feel like a canary you've tossed into a corner. I miss you so much, but I dare not disturb you." Up front, Li Sheng kept his eyes on his nose and his nose on his heart, as if he hadn't heard anything happening behind. I had rarely seen my aunt so seductive. Listening to her sweet, alluring voice, I felt my whole body grow hot. I wanted to glance at the rearview mirror, but didn't dare to look too obviously. When we arrived at the doorstep, my aunt got out of the car unsteadily, supported by Zhou Bin. As soon as she got out, she wrapped her arms around Zhou Bin's waist, lifted her stunningly seductive face, and asked him for a kiss. Zhou Bin also hugged my aunt's waist, his hand even moving down to her buttocks. He reached out, tapped her nose, and said with a smile, "Your nephew is here. Don't you feel shy?" "Then I don't care. I miss you." My aunt giggled, swaying her body. As soon as she entered, she kicked off her high heels and chuckled. "I don't like anyone but you, and I can't help it." Her posture was like dancing the tango, seductive and charmingly alluring. It left a deep impression on me. I felt that my drunk aunt was exceptionally beautiful, with an indescribable allure. But she was still my aunt. A conflicting feeling of knowing I shouldn't look, but wanting to clashed wildly inside me. Zhou Bin, too, loved the passionate side of Zainan, and after being teased by him, felt his body heat up. He turned his head and called Li Sheng, who was at the door, inside. "Take Shannon out for a walk and come back in half an hour." "Yes, boss." Li Sheng nodded and then looked at me. I understood what that meant, so I turned and followed behind Li Sheng, ready to leave. But as I was walking out, I inexplicably glanced back, as Zhou Bin used his foot to hook the door shut. He had already tightly embraced my aunt and lowered his head to kiss her. The next moment, the door was closed. I was shut outside, cut off from the world inside the door. Faintly, I could hear the heavy panting coming from him and my aunt, and then the sound grew fainter. They must have gone to the room. I wasn't stupid. Even if I hadn't seen it, I could guess what he was taking my aunt to the room to do. "Stop listening, let's go." At that moment, the driver Li Sheng hooked his arm around my neck and cheerfully led me to the car, then handed me a cigarette. "Here, have a cigarette to calm yourself down." "I don't smoke." "Oh, right, I forgot you don't smoke." Li Sheng suddenly realized and then lit one for himself. He smoked like an old hand, very suave. After lighting up, he took a puff and blew out a cloud of smoke, looking at me with a smile as he asked, "Have you found a job yet?" "Yes, I have. I'm working as a waiter at Dinghong Supreme now." "A host?" "I suppose so," I replied awkwardly. I had deliberately said I was a waiter because I already knew what a host meant. It was a bit like a gigolo, which made me embarrassed. Hearing this, Li Sheng looked at me with interest and asked, "There are plenty of rich women at Dinghong Supreme. Has any of them ever hit on you?" And no, not at all. I blushed as I answered. Li Sheng looked me up and down, tooting softly. "That's strange. You're actually quite handsome, not short, and you have that innocent young look. You should be popular with rich women. How come none of them made a move on you in that place?" I stammered an explanation. "I was in training before. Today is my first day on the job." "No wonder." Li Sheng chuckled upon hearing this, then looked at me and asked, "By the way, you don't have my number, do you? Let me give it to you. If anything comes up, you can call me." Li Sheng understood clearly. Normally, even if a big boss wanted to fool around, there would be plenty of women willing to be his mistress. He would never pick a woman from the nightclubs, no matter how beautiful or hot she was. But Zhang Zinan was different. Zhang Zinan had a pure look, very much like the big boss's first love. For a big shot like him, ordinary women had lost their appeal. Only a woman with that first love charm could move him. Moreover, Zhang Zinan didn't have the snobbishness and materialism of nightclub women. She rarely asked for anything. A week ago was the first time she asked the big boss for help to drive her to find this chonin. Just looking like the big boss's first love already put her ahead of 90% of women. Being more sensible, Zhang Zinan could hardly fail to earn the big boss's favor. For this reason, Li Sheng planned to privately establish a connection with me. Although he was just a driver, not just anyone could have his phone number. Even those with higher positions than him couldn't. Because he was the big boss's mouthpiece, anything had to go through him, like paying respects at his doorstep, and then he would filter it before deciding whether to mention it to the big boss. Then Li Sheng, afraid that I, just starting out in society, wouldn't understand the value of his phone number, said to me with a hint of pride and a chuckle, "Not to brag, but on this land of Xinjiang, there's nothing your big brother can't handle." Li Sheng originally thought that after he said this, I would instantly understand the value of his phone number and quickly thank him gratefully. But soon Li Sheng was dumbfounded, seeing that I said with difficulty, "I don't have a phone, how about I memorize your number?" "Oh, I forgot you don't have a phone." Li Sheng slapped his forehead. "Wasn't it just a week ago because you didn't have a phone that the big boss was disturbed and drove over to look for you?" So he said to me, "Tell you what, I have an old Nokia 3210 that I'm not using. I'll give it to you tomorrow." No, I said, startled, quickly waving my hands. Phones are expensive these days, especially Nokia ones. Even the cheapest ones cost over 1,000 yuan. How could I possibly accept such a valuable gift? Don't be so polite. Anyway, that Nokia is a phone I've phased out and don't use. It's just sitting there. I've got a new phone now, the latest Motorola V8088. Pretty nice, huh? Mr. Li was very pleased with my reaction. With his spirits fully up, he took out a brand new black Motorola V8088 and waved it in front of me. A black flip phone. It was especially compact and stylish. I was immediately captivated by it.